voter motivation. We needed turnout. Sam has just been talking about turnout or the absence of it in our community. And this is typically the case rather than atypical. The study of history. I'm constantly on the internet, people are saying how they're woke. They're not woke. They're talking about being woke. I mean, if they were woke, some of the woke folk would be here. Because as far as I know, this is the first time since somewhere in the 70s that this particular film tape has been shown in this particular city. And this 1 hour tape, and you see the pictures of the people there. This is our history, our political history, with a black agenda. Number 4 is media. You see the media over there, the media up here, media here. That is part of our purpose. And then project management in terms of producing. Now, you may think, and I hear this all the time, small audience. It's not a small audience, not to me. Back in the day when I was producer director of Concept East at 401 East Adams, we used to have quote-unquote small audiences. The size of the audience is not particularly crucial. It just means that you have an opportunity to participate more. So that with that, I'll end my introduction and turn it over to Sam Riddle before we go into our first DVD, an opening entree of about 8 minutes. Then we'll have a break in which we'll discuss that, and then we'll get into an hour length on Nationtime Care. Sam?
You know, it's an honor to be here in Detroit at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. It's an honor because what we're talking about is something that really, to me, you live something and you really don't think of it as historical, or you haven't participated in a historical event. But I was 25 years ago when that convention, the first National Black Political Convention, took place in Gary, Indiana, over 46 years ago. I was 25, I was finishing up my undergrad at Michigan State University. I served 4 years in the military, and we were like leading a lot of and working with a lot of demonstrations, anti-war, anti-racism, pro-black, pro-life, and we don't mean it the same way right-wing means pro-life. But and during that period of time, I had managed to come into contact with some of our heroes who've gone on now, like Muhammad Ali. It seems like just yesterday that I was picking him up at the airport, Capital City Airport in Lansing. First time I'd ever seen a mobile phone. He had a briefcase. In it was a phone. And I was amazed. I have a picture of me holding an old 8mm camera, because even then, instinctively, I understood the importance of recording and defining what we're doing. That's what drew me to David Rambeau with Project Bait, and For My People and Ron Scott many years ago when we donned the dashikis and going, I think it was Channel 50, late at night. And sometimes real late at night, Ron Scott and I, when I started doing political stuff, were sneaking in and edit some of our political commercials, because we understand our people. And with our people, we must communicate. We must work the media. That can be good or bad. You've seen a white power advocate, neo-fascist, white supremacist, Donald Trump, work the media. The media ran Donald Trump's campaign. The media. He worked it while we looked at it. And for me in Gary, Indiana, I can remember getting in the car with Nathaniel Turner. Think about that, Nat Turner. Nat Turner, that was his name. He was a rotund black man, county commissioner, Genesee County, Flint, Michigan, lived on the north end of Flint. With us also, there were 3 of us, me, him, and Edgar Holt. They were my elders. Edgar Holt was an icon with the Flint NAACP. They made national news and they flew a whole plane full of folks. I think the Selma, they did a lot of things in the civil rights movement before it was hip or cool to do it. And I'm in the car with these two giants at the time. I didn't realize it was just Edgar and Nat, to me, Nat Turner. Nat said, we stopped at the Julian Vineyards on the way to Gary, and Nat said, now, we want to, just stop in the vineyard, they did a little wine tasting, all that. He said, now we're going to stop over my cousin or nephew's cousin's house. I said, where's that? He said, in Gary. I said, who's your cousin? He said, Richard Hatcher. I said, the mayor, Gary? Yeah. And we just went in there the way you would go to anyone's house. Come to my house, come to David's house, knock on the door, no cell phones. And we went to the mayor, a national figure, Richard Hatcher's house, and he just greeted us. I think back on it, that's probably the last time I've seen or spoken to Richard Hatcher, but he was one of the conveners of the first National Black Political Convention. I didn't think that much about it. I think I was working with David Holmes or Basil Brown. Basil Brown back then. Basil Brown was a state senator from Highland Park. His housemate in Lansing was a state senator named Coleman Young. And they had another white housemate, Polish guy, I can't recall his name right now, but the point I'm making is that Coleman was basically the leader of the Michigan delegation to the first National Black Political Convention. And what I remember most from that convention is that there were so many of us in one spot in Gary, Indiana. And that's where I first, I checked out this guy that later would define as a country preacher, Jesse Jackson. I think that's where I may have first heard Minister Louis Farrakhan. A couple of Congress people were there. I think Diggs from Detroit was there. But I'm just 25 years old. I'm finishing up at Michigan State, getting ready to go to law school in Ann Arbor, University of Michigan Law School. I've been accepted there. And I'm just kind of hanging out. My level of consciousness was sufficient, but you get there and you're participating, you're listening to the speakers and whatnot. And I don't think many of us understood the historical significance of what was taking place there as we were shaping a black political agenda. But what strikes me now is that I recite what happened in Gary, Indiana, every time I'm on television or radio. I've probably done as much national and local and state radio and TV as anyone you'll meet. And I always now say, 46 years later, we're still talking about the same issues in terms of self-determination, in terms of us striving to control our own destiny so we control lay the foundation for our children and for the elders. But it's the same generic struggle. It hasn't changed. The elections come and go, but struggle is never ending. And one of the things we learned over the years is how ego kills. Because when we were in Gary, one of the things that occurred, I'm not going to discuss, I don't have a minute or two here. One of the things that occurred that I like to talk about is we have deified Coleman Young in Detroit. Now, Coleman and Basil Brown used to rescue me as an undergrad at Michigan State because we led demonstrations which offended a lot of people, mostly white, some handkerchief-head enablers that were always trying to put out our fire. They still exist today, of course, different names. And I looked up to Coleman Young, even then. And when we got to Gary, at one point I can remember Coleman saying, we can't live with this. What do you mean? Man, they talking about leaving the Democratic Party. I can remember blurting in the back, well, hey man, the Democratic Party left us a long time ago. All they want is our vote. I was talking about gerrymandering over in Flint in the 70s. Floyd Clapp was the beneficiary of that. When we denied a white liberal an election, the unions had wired it from Mark Clodfelter, but we denied them that election by running a black candidate to denying the black vote, and then a conservative white Democrat got the seat, and we said we do that every time till they carved out a district. That's a district that later elected us State Rep Floyd Clapp. But again, make a long story short, Coleman Young made a conscious decision that which I consider to be real reactionary. He said that we can't live with this because they're talking about leaving the Democratic Party, a Democratic Party that even then in 1972 did not have the interests of a key component of its coalition, black voters. They did not care about us any more than what our vote was worth to them. They were pimps, the Democratic Party, and they're still pimps. They're still pimps, and we let them get away with it year after year after year. But I can remember at one point, Coleman Young said, we're gonna have to walk out on this thing. They're going too far. They're talking about leaving the Democratic Party, and I yelled at him, well, the Democratic Party left us. There was some cuss words exchanged. I can remember exchanging them with him. Ed Vaughn was there. And matter of fact, Ed recalled that when we had a thing for him here in this very room. It seems like it might have been about a year ago. And some of you were there. And Ed recounted that too, but Coleman Young did lead the bulk of the delegates from Michigan. Now, but 5 of us refused to leave so that Michigan would have a presence and vote on whatever was being passed in Gary, Indiana. I didn't realize significant enough. I mean, I guess I thought we were just being, a little stubborn, not going along with Coleman, because we just instinctively did not agree with him. And analytically, we felt that he was simply wrong, because we understood the difference between the Democratic Party and people of African descent engaging in a never-ending struggle rather than being the chattel property of a party, the Democratic Party. Even then, some of us talked about why should we remain on the Democratic Party plantation that did not have our best interests at heart. But even then, there was a class divide, the same class divide we see in Detroit right now. Most politicians don't get it. Especially, these white politicians, when they feel comfortable with someone that's black, and they talk about getting out the vote, that probably ensures they won't be able to get out the vote, because they don't understand the deep class divide within the black community even today. But even then, it was manifesting itself when 5 of us said no to Coleman Young. That would later cost me a job I had in the state legislature when I returned to Michigan. But in a nutshell, the key component for me of Gary, Indiana, was that it was people of African descent standing strong, the forerunner to the Million Man March that would take place later, that I also participated in with Congressman John Conyers, who was politically lynched here. And phony white liberals led that lynching with no due process recently. But when Congressman Conyers and I set up the meeting with Attorney General Janet Reno for that Million Man March, and we were discussing some of the logistics, and the Nation of Islam sent Leonard Farrakhan Mohammed, married to Minister Farrakhan's daughter. He and I spoke on the stage. I sat on the stage recently at the 23rd anniversary of the Million Man March at Aretha Franklin Amphitheater. And I reminded Leonard Farrakhan Mohammed of what happened when he came. And remember, this is a direct result of the 1972 political convention, First National Black Political Convention. That's what the Million Man March really was to me. It was a growth from there. And even though it was under the auspices of the Nation of Islam. But when Leonard Farrakhan Mohammed and the Fruit of Islam rolled into Washington to Janet Reno's office building, I wrote an article about this for some papers in Virginia, small chain of papers. It was to me the clash of the straight ties, security for the Attorney General, and the bow ties, the Fruit of Islam. And everyone had grown in the intervening years, from 1972 to 1995. And the way the growth had manifested itself was that, simply put, the nation said they were going to put 1 million men. And the crowd easily exceeded that in the mall. Janet Reno, when she saw that the Nation of Islam had actually sent someone there, and people looked at the Fruit of Islam and radiating discipline, you know what she did when we got into her conference room? And I had personally spoken to her to set up the meeting and who would attend. Representatives from the Nation of Islam, Congressman Conyers and me. She did a ballet pirouette and she said, my meeting is with, and it's very weird because she put my name first, Mr. Riddle and Congressman Conyers only. No one else is to be here. She basically evicted the organization that would place over 1 million men in the mall in Washington, D.C. And Minister Leonard Farrakhan Muhammad had to leave. I reminded him of that when he was just in Detroit, when Minister Farrakhan was here. Sunday before last, I think it was, at Aretha Franklin Amphitheater. And he said, that's right, that was historical. And again, when you're living something and participating in it, at the time, I didn't think it was historical. I discussed it with Congressman Conyers. I had made the arrangements with the Attorney General. You have to have the people who are convening the event, the Million Man March, participate. And it got so heated between me and Attorney General Reno that Congressman Conyers said, and this is all linked to the 1972 Gary Convention because my attitude and everything was steeped in that first National Black Political Convention. The growth pattern was directly related to that. The Million Man March was directly related to that. Minister Louis Farrakhan, young man, speaking in Gary, Indiana, was maturing every day from then. All of that's connected to the first National Black Political Convention. The Million Man March did not happen in isolation. The Million Man March was a direct result of the growth from the first National Black Political Convention in Gary, when all of us saw the potential of what happens when we come together as a body from all over the nation, all over the world, people of African descent, men of African descent. And when you look at it, Rambeau, one of the things, again, that strikes me in that conversation, Congressman Conyers said, Mr. Riddle, that's no way to talk to the Attorney General of the United States of America. I said, Congressman, the Attorney General of the United States is a damn liar. She knew who was supposed to be here. That attitude was steeped and really developed, even though I didn't realize it then, from Gary, Indiana. When I used the same tone of voice to tell Coleman Young, it isn't about us leaving the Democratic Party like slaves escaping from a plantation. It was the Democratic Party that had left us, and how ironic that I had gone to Gary with a Genesee County commissioner named Nat Turner, cousin of Richard Hatcher, that's all.
Prior to Gary, there were other black conventions, and our opening DVD will present a brief 8-minute piece to give you an even deeper historical background.
I think it was 1974, right? 73, 74, something right in that period of time. I had taken office in 74. But the point I think he served from 74 to 94, but the point I'm making is that as much as we really revere Coleman Young and his political legacy here in Detroit, Michigan, and the nation, he knew the potential to totally disrupt the Democratic Party, some of the principles we were espousing in terms of seeking political independence from the plantation of the Democratic Party. And he personally, I felt, couldn't live with that because of his political agenda. It all has a way of working out. We love some Coleman Young, clearly. But at the same time, as a young 24, 25-year-old, I felt free to check him in Gary as we, yelled and screamed at one another. And we, later crossed paths time again. And Congressman Conyers once even ran against him for mayor. That was an ill-fated run. That was very interesting, that whole process. But you can be a part of history and be totally unaware of it. When I look at the folks that are right here in this auditorium right now, you know, a fella took considerably less than the folks that are here, took a dozen, one of them a little shaky, and rocked the whole world, the whole planet. 12, one of them a little shaky, and we've got at least three times that many here. David doesn't want to hear that. That's an ideological thing. But you know, when we look at these conventions, one of the things we've got to leave with is the reality that when we come together and we define our agenda, we define what we want to see our destinies evolve to, then we become truly dangerous to those that have a vested interest in controlling us. And they will send people that look just like us to disrupt our very existence, to ensure that we do not come together with any level of success to agitate on our own behalf. That's the other thing that I remember about Gary leaving there and hearing, when I got back to Michigan, all the negativity about what went down in Gary, and it was clear they didn't see the same Gary I saw. Well, it was the same way when I was at the Million Man March. I mean, the positive vibes you get. I took my youngest son, we were on the stage with Congressman Conyers, and we left the stage and walked through that whole crowd to the back of it, no incidents, nothing. But it's how we take, what do we do when we convene? We have an agenda, but we don't follow up. When we don't follow up, we end up with empty auditoriums during the time when auditoriums should be filled. We're in Detroit, where 70% of the children wake up every day in abject poverty. We should have been meeting out by now, but we aren't. We aren't. But when we come together as a collective like this, I mean, we're dangerous and we can be productive, but we've got to shape an agenda and then follow up and implement it.
We have to shape a black agenda.
That's right.
There's a difference. All right, now, in this film, in this tape, you should notice, you may have noticed several things, and we can have a discussion of some of those things before we go into the Gary piece. If you notice, she said that what was buried was the colored conventions, buried in history. And what was brought forward was the integrated activities of the abolitionist movement, okay? It's because in terms of framing the narrative, the black organization was suppressed and the integrated, and to a great extent, undergirded by white abolitionists, movement was brought to forward, was communicated. So even if you study quote-unquote black history, somebody turn your phone off, please, and that is what, that narrative is what you learn. And this was just found. And the next thing that is crucial to understand out of this very short film is that they took minutes. They took minutes, okay? And those minutes have, until, as she indicated, being resurrected, they weren't available. But now they will be digitally worldwide. With this, Gary, in working on the research to produce this program, we're still waiting to find the minutes of their final summary report. We haven't been able to find it anywhere in the city. So when we talked this past week, Leon Malcolm and myself talked with Richard Hatcher over the phone. So I asked him, does he have the minutes, the summary report? He said he did, and that he would email them to the owner and myself. They're nowhere around. They're certainly not on the internet, and nobody who I've spoken to who was at the convention has a copy of them. I had Sam, he didn't have.
I barely have a memory.
You see? So that's an example of the media not being available to us. It was crucially important. Now, notice who was the narrator. Who was the interviewer? A young white woman, okay? She was employee of the station. The same thing exists now. Who is the person controlling the money? Who is doing the editing? They were, okay? You have to understand that. That is in contradistinction to the Gary piece, which was developed by Bill Greaves, okay? He produced it. And that's the story of it in and of itself. Because in looking around for the DVD, which we're going to show next, there were no copies in the city, except that Leona had the only copy that we've been able to find, okay? And at this time, I certainly wanted to thank and express appreciation for Leona McElveen, because it is her outreach that brought us the DVD that we're going to see. Her research brought us this one that you just seen. And it is that kind of constructive, directed research that is so important from a black perspective if we're going to find anything. And then also for our being here and having access to this attractive auditorium and the equipment developed by Dr. Charles H. Wright of the Museum of African American History. Incidentally, through the Coleman young years, and he had a big conflict with Dr. Wright about this in terms of control. And there's a history and a story about that has also not been told. So that now Sam can talk beautifully about Coleman and about individual leadership, which I can't in any way, shape, or form second that emotion.
Had an ongoing program in terms of the unions, and the notion was that the unions was telling Coleman Young he should not. Now, in my case, I decided not to go because I thought I really knew what was going to go on.
You mean you didn't go to the Gary convention?
I wanted to take my camera and be there.
But you weren't there.
I my own self. Now, I didn't go.
Okay, not a problem.
The
Not a
reason I
problem.
didn't go was because my take on it was going to be too commercial, and the stuff I was probably already heard. Oh, I had a lot of respect for Baraka. As a poet and as a leader of that group, that was me and Gary during the time that Hatcher was mayor and Gary, but I didn't go, and I denied my own self some pleasure because I wanted to go, but I just said that it was too commercial.
Right.
So I kept my camera and I didn't go down there.
Okay. It was anything but commercial.
Anyone else?
Yeah, it wasn't.
Anyone else? Comment on the short film. Because we're going to go into the next one right after this. Any other questions, comments?
I'm just glad, David, you invited me here. I didn't, really prepare anything, but I'm just glad I came here and had the memory refreshed from having been there. And again, sometimes you can be part of something. You saw the Michigan presence. Congressman Charlie Diggs. That's why when people got on me, they said, Sam, why'd you come down on Doug Diggs like that? I said because he had Barbara McQuaid, a federal prosecutor there. The same type of woman that prosecuted his father and his grandfather at a $1,000 a plate fundraiser at his house over there funding the Democratic headquarters in Grosse Pointe. This has just happened. And I said, you know, when you look at the history of his father, Charles Diggs, his grandfather, a state senator, and what happened to them, they had to be rolling over in their graves at the thought that a son and a grandson would have had a federal prosecutor like McQuaid there. No matter what you think about him, the reason they could charge $1,000 a plate for was because Barbara McQuaid walks around with Kwame Kilpatrick's head on a platter, not unlike the way that they walked around with John the Baptist's head on a platter. No matter what you think about what he did, right or wrong. That's just my reality, David Rambeau.
What is some of the realities from the audience? What do you have to say? Comments, questions, additions, pledges of support for the Museum of African American History that housed and enabled us to present this message, because it sure isn't home. I mean, as Jesse said, Hatcher could call the folk home because he ran the city. We certainly can't do that in Detroit now, can we? So what do you have to say for yourself?
Say it.
Let's just speak up. Take a mic or speak to the people.
And I was incarcerated 24 years straight. I got been out 4 years. And in fact, like a month after I got out of prison, me and Sam Riddle for the Michigan Citizen, we were interviewing Kevin Orr for that paper. And that was the last time I seen you. But anyway, I'm so thrilled to be here because while I was incarcerated, the first time I ever even learned about the Gary Convention was reading a book by Dr. Ronald Walters. He was a political scientist, and he really went off into detail into that. And the other time I heard about it was by Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture. So the point I'm trying to make now, since I've been out, and I've always wanted to learn more about that convention, and the presentation you brothers presented today was so riveting, it felt like I was there. I wanted to clap every time I heard people talk. But the issue is, since I've been out, I grew up on scholars like Dr. Claude Anderson, Dr. John Henry Clark, Yosef Ben Yakanam, Alefi Asante, Naim Akbar. And what's happening now is we have a group of what they call radical integrationist intellectuals led by people like Cornel West, Michael Eric Dyson. And I'm not saying that they are bad people in themselves, but they're controlling the narrative. They're not talking about a black agenda now. They're talking about an everybody agenda or something like that. So my question to you guys is this, and this is what I want to learn, because I think about these things every day. What can I do to, make a change in Black America? So my question to you is, what was present in 1971, 1972, or prior to that, that made the people come up with an idea of even having a convention? What was the ethos at the time? What was the political mores that got people saying that such a convention was actually necessary?
Well, when I listen to you, Dyson, John Coltrane, a wordsmithing from Detroit, doesn't have to control the narrative. When I hear you speak, you capable of helping direct some of the narrative. If you just organize your neighbors, your community. The narrative is controlled by those that take action, that do something. Wordsmithing is not enough. Never be intimidated by wordsmithers. The people that do the heavy lifting, they are the ones that can really control the narrative. That's one of the things that was said at that convention when the delegates were told that you are in charge here. You're in charge here. And you saw how the man formerly known as Leroy Jones, Baraka, handled it when Michigan was getting ready to walk out. They tried to prevent it as much as they could, but they just addressed it, dealt with it, and answered with Nationtime. But what was different then from now, I mean, it was a different period of time, but people were fed up of being used in the political process and being treated as if they were, and we are today, on a Democratic Party plantation. But it went much deeper than that in terms of their own communities. Bobby Seale's there because the Panther Party was their on-the-ground manifestation of resistance to oppression, police brutality. They got shot up because they were feeding kids breakfast in the morning. That's one of the reasons. But anyway, the whole point I'm making is that what was different was a level of consciousness, a sense of linkage to the mother continent that wasn't said in disdain or held in disdain, the linkage to Africa, the understanding we are an African people, breathing that into a reality. That now you say it in Detroit and put on the dashiki and you held in disdain, the total rejection of self.
You know, one of the things that strikes me when you say that, gentleman right here is a checker player, and I play checkers with him. He whips me all the time, you know, regular piece of checkers. But I tell him every time before we sit down, I'm getting you today. I'm getting you today. And you know what he says to me? That's what your mouth say. Every time I tell him that, he says, that's what your mouth say. All that is, you know, that's what their mouths say. All right? Like Sam said, you know, mouth. Now, we passed out the paper. You know what it says? 20 follow-ups. This event may seem like a combination. It's not. It's just part of the process. And of all the times that I've come here for folk who sit up here and talk a lot, they never pass out any literature that says, what's the next step?
Yeah.
Well, this is, you know, we put 20 steps down, you know, and like Lee always tells me, don't let it be, that's what your mouth say, you know. But every once in a while, I get it. And it's not because I tell him I'm gonna do it, it's because he doesn't give me any slack. So when I win, it ain't what I say I'm gonna do, it's what I got to do.
What you do.
And that's what, same thing, hey, Michael Dyson's run, that's just what their mouths say. Don't pay too much attention to that. Yeah,
And don't be intimidated by words. Don't let anyone intimidate you that's got a title, doctor, lawyer, whatever. I mean, do not be intimidated by the wordsmithing. I've been on panels with Cornel West before. I've given Michael Eric Dyson a ride in my limo in Philadelphia. I mean, what the fuck?
Don't.
Yeah.
Let me.
I'm sorry.
In terms of our so-called scholars, believe me, I come to here, they make more mistakes than a little bit, more mistakes. You know, we have a strong Black history background, all right? But this is Black history, and I'm not a historian. And Leona is an historian, and we're bringing you the history in the History Museum. Where are historians bringing you this history?
Yeah.
Where are the politicians bringing you the Black political convention that we need now, today?
Yeah.
I mean, don't be looking up to anybody. You know one of the reasons why I don't like this room? We're usually in the basement. This is the first time we've been presented up here. Is because in the basement, everybody sits on the same level.
Yeah.
All the chairs on the same level. You know, we look eye to eye. And the reason why this table is down front, close to you, is because we can see you, you can see us closer. They put the big comfortable chairs. No, we're sitting here close to you, so you can see us close up. Don't let it be what this mouth say, or that mouth say, or those mouths say. It's what you do. It's on the board. I got the whip with you.
Yeah.
You know, it's on the board. There's nowhere else.
Yeah. And You've been locked up. You know what it is. You're not gonna be intimidated. You carry yourself.
You survived.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I get that part of it personally.
So much I could say, but I think back then, as I recall, we were coming together because we did have a good leader, which was Martin Luther King, and a few others, and even though it had been a few years prior, some of those people that were with him still survived, and they managed to keep us together more so as a group because of what Martin Luther King did. Well, in time, we started getting some rights because the powers that be said, huh, these people are serious, they're still together. They could really do some damage. So they started giving us a few things. Well, eventually, over time, new generations come about. You've got the Gen X, the Gen Y, and now the millennials, and so on and so forth. And one way to bring a person down, or a group of people, or a race of people, is to give them everything and make them feel like they belong. Now you got a job that pays well. Now you can sit next to us at the dinner table instead of in the kitchen. So now we feel like we have arrived, and we start looking down at our own because we're told, well, you're not like them. You're with one of us now. And we started getting real comfortable, and well, I don't need to go with that group of people. We don't need to fight for anything. We don't. They do. And so we're going to be with them because they let us sit in the kitchen, at the dining room table with them. So we're going to help fight for these people here and forget about where we came from. Well, eventually some of those and more of us, they're taking away from us. And one way to bring a person down is slowly but surely. Many of us used to be middle class. We're not middle class anymore. And the more and more you make a person hungry, the more and more you have a chance of controlling them. And this is where so many of us are going. There's still a few of us sitting at the dining room table. And those are what you may call the moles that will sneak off with a little bit of information here, and then they'll go down there where the rest of us are at. And yeah, I know, they do me the same way, but I'm gonna hang in there, so on and so forth. Hey, you know the information I got? And slowly but surely, we get brought down. And it's history which repeats itself. At some point, we got to beat down to nothing before we start doing that again. And it's unfortunate.
I was wondering, was the corporate control of the Michigan delegation as far as the unions and things concerned, it was the reason why Coleman walked out.
Did you hear Jesse when he, in effect, keynoted, and the whole theme of Nationtime was moving independently, even in the political arena, and getting our own political party? I mean, that was said blatantly. The moment that was said, that was it for the Michigan delegation, which most of those that were sent there, a lot of them were unionists, or they were supported by unionists, and they lived, and their livelihood was dependent upon the relationship with the unions and the Democratic Party. They had a vested interest in the status quo. And but for a handful of us, again 5, who said, no, we won't go, and you heard the guy narrating up there say that some of the Michigan delegation stayed so that we would have a delegation. That was just us, just a handful. We grabbed the mic and voted, say whatever. It was just 5 though. And we were ostracized when we came back here. But yes, it was union corporate control, yeah. And it still goes on, except the unions have gotten weaker and weaker, weaker and weaker. They didn't understand it, but not going along and fighting the status quo, they were sealing their own doom. And you've seen the demise of the unions here. And you see the corruption within the union movement with the FBI living next door to them all the time right now. And that's not over. That story's not over in Detroit.
Was there an economic component in 1972 at this convention?
Yeah, just a whole agenda that came out of it in terms of, did you hear Jesse when he said if we're 20%
Yes.
of the population?
He was demanding 20% of everything.
Yeah, exactly, but that concept was there, and also it was in writing. I guess if I went through a whole bunch of stuff, I might be able to find some of it, like David said.
So, Brother Sam, I don't want to sound negative, but I had a conversation with Jesse about 25 years ago.
Uh-huh,
Working with Chuck Keller,
uh-huh,
working with Reverend Holland.
uh-huh.
And, you know, there was a newspaper consortium in Michigan called the Michigan Black Press Association, which Chuck helped found.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
So, but at that time,
He was the founder of the Michigan Citizen, of course.
well, I'm talking about the Michigan Black Press.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, I'm just saying, yeah.
So what Jesse was doing at that time, his conversation was about having an executive placed at Nike as part of that 20%.
I don't doubt it, Jesse's been taking care of, Jesse, a lot of us that were there in 1972 betrayed the people. We betrayed the people. I mean, in terms of our own personal agendas and whatnot. Do you hear Jesse talking about reparations now?
You don't even hear from him.
He talked about reparations there. That he got, maybe his loudest applause line was when he said that then. But you won't hear that now. I mean, as we grow, we can either grow stronger or we spread our branches, and you can't stand on the branches, they're too weak.
One of the things about the convention that I'm searching for is their economic, their financial report. Now, if anything that is vaporous, nebulous, ghost-like, will be the financials. So this past week, we had a conference call, Leona, myself, and Hatch. Leona hooked it up. So I asked him about the money, because, you know, like they say, show me the money, all right? So one of the interesting things he said is that the black entertainers that you saw on the film, that they had a fundraiser, that they did a fundraiser for the convention, during the convention to help pay the bills. All right, so that was one item. I'm hearing it from the horse's mouth, all right, action. Leona also hooked up a conference call with Louise Greaves, the widow of Bill Greaves, who made the film, and David Greaves, the son. So there's always got to be money in terms of production of any medium. So I asked them about that, all right? And what was Bill Greaves' hope in terms of making some money or just breaking the cost? So the son, David Greaves, said that they didn't break even. They didn't make any money on the film. And on the film was actually, when they originally released it, was an hour and a half, 90 minutes. But this DVD is 58 minutes, so they cut it back. They cut it back, in my judgment, 58 minutes for TV, all right? But they indicated that Greaves wanted to sell it to the networks, but the networks refused to buy it because only the networks could really afford to pay for the amount of film they shot. And they shot on film, and film back in the day was really expensive to shoot. You know, you had to buy the film, you had to develop it, you had to make prints, okay? And that's tens of thousands of dollars. So in my mind, to do this, and all the camera people and the trips and all that, must have cost them somewhere around at least a couple $100,000. And David said, the son said, they didn't get anywhere near that. They lost a ton of money on making this film. All right? So that now, if you're asking about getting a DVD, the DVD from William Greaves Productions online costs $175.
Wow.
Huh?
Wow.
No, that's cheap. That's cheap because you see that's because it's on tape, it's on DVD.
Yeah.
But if you got it on film, and you wanted to buy the film, it would cost you $5,000, $10,000.
Yeah.
So you hear what he said, wow, that's not wow, that's a nickel. That's a nickel. And the only reason it is a nickel is because essentially the Japanese tore the market out of the film business. Okay? That's the only reason why it's now a $5,000 or $10,000 product you can get for $175. But how many of those films, DVDs are in this city? The only one we could find thus far is the one Leona bought, okay? Got from Louise Greaves, the widow.
Yeah.
Back in the day, Malik Yakini, some of you may know, he said his group showed it in the 70s. And they rented the film because, you know, camcorders weren't out then. They rented the film from California newsreel. Okay, so you could rent a film for a certain amount of money, then you had to send the film back. Okay, the DVD, you can take it, pay the $175 and keep it. And that's why we were able to present it to you today. And it's the same thing with this production. This is production, all right? Pulling all this together. The budget I put together on this was $4,000, okay? Just to do all of this. And it is happening because Sam didn't get paid.
I'm not looking to get paid, but you
Yeah, but the bottom line is, Sam didn't get paid, I didn't get paid, Leona didn't get paid. Charles, who gave us the places on the payroll to the museum, there's a museum payroll only because some people here, I assume, are members of the museum. Now, the word is in the community that some members are dissatisfied with the direction of the museum. Well, that may be, but here we sit tonight, and that's a decision that you have to make. So that if the next time, if the corporations control the museum, we may be showing it in a basement somewhere. The next one, all right, the next one out of this list of 20 follow-ups, and that's our challenge, okay? Because we have media person there, me, you know, and a couple other folks. You know, that's what your mouth say, but the question is, what do we do? What do we do? Anyone else? Yes.
To that point, I know, I was Charles, one of the things they had here a few weeks ago, he was saying that, and I may hopefully get this as close as right as possible, that they had sent something, they were planning on making this area, DIA, the historical museum, the library, this general area, a cultural area for this. And he said when they sent this to, I guess, whoever that they were going to decide to make this with, or was going to name it as that somehow or another they forgot and didn't include the Wright. Imagine that. So
no, that's great.
And then they sent it back. No. And then they sent it back.
Yes.
And said he said he sent it back, and they said, well, wait a minute, you forgot the Wright. He said, oh, our mistake. So when they sent it back to include it, he was asking people for whatever ideas and things like that they have to make sure we are included. Because if we're not included, guess what? This could very well disappear. You see how Detroit is changing now? We need to do something to support this if we want to keep it going on and have somewhere. I mean, Detroit, regardless of what people want to think now, the new faces of Detroit, we built this city. We built it by working in the factories. It's a motor city, and it would not have been as it is now if it hadn't been a lot of us coming from the South and making it as it is. I don't care what they want to say it is now. You know, they want to say it's the rock city and all that. It's Motown. And we put the foundation here. Now everybody wants to come and live in the house and claim it as their own.
The level of consciousness of most of the people in this room, that does not escape them. That's appreciated. Really appreciate it. But you know, I didn't mean, David, to diminish the worth of Jesse Jackson in my response to the gentleman up there. Again, Jesse's real legacy was getting people, I believe, to participate in the political process, registering people to vote, all that. Yeah, we know his rep now is that of hustling the process and the system and all that. But the reality is that his contribution was, I believe, the large numbers of people he registered to vote and to participate in the political process. And I don't negate its worth at all.
Let me comment on what the young lady said. It goes back to the economic piece, the use of productive resources. And Jesse Jackson commented about it in the film. All right? Now, when they talk about, that is the powers, other folks talk about their plaza and they overlook this museum. It's nothing new. You see, the DIA gets a millage. They get government support. Wayne Open and Macomb. All right, they're under Riddle. Now, when they went to get the millage to support essentially a rich man's art museum, they left the right out of that. Okay? That's when the crucial being left out happened, when they talked about the money. All right? What they're talking about now is including or excluding the museum, because when they exclude, they keep the money. So that in this sense, when they exclude, that means they're not coming to take. That is not a defeat. That is not a defeat. Because once they include on the money, they're going to take the power clear as day. Now this happens all the time. If you look at the history of black institutions, all right, or operations, when they put in the investment, they come to take. It is the same way when we talk about Africa. The Chinese are investing heavily now in African nations. And the conflict or the discussion now about the role of the Chinese is that they are there to take over African nations economically, all right? That they already do that with the way they handle their capital. It is the same thing. Money doesn't come, isn't allotted either to an institution like the museum or to any one of us without strings attached. And who controls the purse is there to be a power person, a power broker. So that if they say, oh, we forgot you, they didn't forget. Don't believe that they're that stupid.
Right.
Okay, they're not that stupid. If they do that, it's willfully. Just like they left this museum out of the village. This museum wouldn't have a dollar problem if they got a millage. We're a piece of the millage that DIA got, but we're not. This institution isn't. So it's a plus minus. So don't. I mean, it's more than what it appears to be. You were going to say something?
Yes, what I found striking is that was done almost 50 years ago. And it could have been done last year, this year. The message is still the same. Very little as far as the message has changed. And very few of the problems have been solved. One of the things that we are doing is to look at the research and what the resolution that came out of that. There are a lot of leaders that aren't with us anymore, but also there are those like Obama who we never thought that we'd see rise to such a position. So as it was then, the emphasis is not on the leaders, it's on us. And this is one of the reasons we dug back and got this and wanted to present it. Hopefully, we will be doing this again with not only this, but other things, and build a larger audience. But more than that, give the information to the people. Because this is something, Gary was in 1972, but as the earlier piece, it existed in 1872, and it should exist today. Whether that was a national convention, but we should have an agenda here in Detroit of concerned citizens. It isn't as if we don't have any problems. The problems still exist. And as was said, I think by Charles Diggs, you know, that it's the people that drive the whole organization. And yes, leaders have come and gone. Several were assassinated. Several have just died. But unless you go back and have an anchor in history, and this is why we're trying, you just flounder around repeating the same mistakes. And it's up to us to inform, to gather. You know, it's going to be a critical time on the 6th when it comes to vote. And already records have been broken as far as the amount of absentee ballots that have already been turned in. Never before in history has so many. And it's just up in the air.
And what's in that for us?
As that's the major.
That was the point of the convention.
That's
What's in that for us?
Where is the black agenda?
And unless we
Have
have
any of
an
your
agenda-
candidates offered you a black agenda?
No.
All right, so
You never even heard one
you never
candidate
even asked them for
in
it.
Detroit say what they would do, and I bring it up just about every other day on radio, what they would do about that 11-month-old black baby girl that stepped into a hole in the floor and just drowned in a basin full of feces and water. Those living conditions are unacceptable, inhumane, and real leadership would have addressed that the moment it occurred, and certainly a reasonable time afterwards. Crickets. We've heard nothing from the so-called leadership here. That means we have the wrong brand of leadership, wrong type of leadership in this city.
Comments, questions? Yes.
I think part of our problem is we keep wanting to put us in this called minority, and then when we start complaining, like we are, you know, not complaining, but talking like we are now, we start saying black. And we know we're not a minority.
I stand here to say to you, I'm out in the streets and I see and I fight for everyone here. Everybody in here before you leave should have a membership at this museum, whether you live in this city or not. You should protect it. And for projects like this, it is no excuse, none whatsoever, that you cannot invite one person if you have to drag them hollering and screaming to be here.
Yes,
if you
ma'am.
go to these white institutions,
I hear you.
they promote it.
I hear you, sister.
So for you to sit here and complain and do nothing, you have no
don't
right
know
to say
that
anything.
The folk here are doing something. I mean, the folk here are here, and that's a plus.
It's a plus, but it's I mean I'm just saying for the sake of who's here. Now I'm doing the work that you're doing. I'm on the bus. I don't have a car. I don't have a home. I'm a renter. I'm 1 foot from homelessness. 1 foot. It is no excuse. None. So don't wave your fancy degrees in my face. I don't want to see them.
Nobody is waving.
No, I'm just saying, I'm not saying that. I'm just speaking. No disrespect to you, sir. None whatsoever. None whatsoever.
I understand.
I'm just speaking of the fact of when we talk about, you know, collectiveness and bargaining and whatever it is as far as what we represent and who we are, this needs to be said. And if I've offended someone, oh well, I'm sorry, but I will not apologize. Thank you.
Yeah, you should. You speak out. How you feel.
Anyone else?
Just like what you say. And we can do all the talking we want to.
Comment?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Please.
Greetings, everyone. I'm from the east side, off of Kirchville and McClellan. There's a lot of things happening, a lot of changes going on over there in that area. And just like the sister said, and somebody else mentioned, it seems like certain parts of the city is being left out of what's happening, what's going on. It seems like there's a takeover happening on the east side of Detroit. And we got some people from Ohio and it's a mixed type of crowd that's come over there off of Mac, right over there, just bought up the Salvation Army and some other little places. And these people not from the east side of Detroit. They came from somewhere else. And it's a takeover happening. I want to know what y'all feel, because I missed out on the film. I did want to see the film, but I am also on the bus. My vehicles have been being stolen since I've been living in low-income apartments because I'm an artist and I paint and I take care of my children by myself. I'm not begging nobody to do nothing for me. So my vehicles have been targeted, my vehicles have been being stolen along the way. But I have to keep on going. So I get on the bus, I get on the train, I catch a cab, whatever I have to do. My sons have been denied education in Detroit public schools because I demand for them to give them quality educations. That's where I stand, so they've been being homeschooled. Right now, I want to know what's happening with the gentrification in the neighborhoods. How are we addressing this?
Because they're giving discount homes to the newbies.
Always there.
Well, not only
I think-
discounts,
I think
they're in Midtown, we're paying premiums, giving tax breaks and paying up to $5,000 a year for people to come in to Midtown. I am also a neighbor. I'm on Mac in Bewick.
Okay.
And I've been on the east side all my life. I've worked at Southeastern. As a matter of fact, at one time or another, I've been in all the high schools. But there are changes. For instance, there on Charlevoix and I can't think of the name. But anyway, Oswell Sweet's home. That family just got a $500,000 grant to make it into a museum, which is nice. But I think there are other places and other things more deserving, or, you know, is this museum going to get $500,000 for what it's done?
Anyone? Yeah.
This being an election year, even if it wasn't an election year, is any of your representatives in this museum today? Is any of these representatives, do you ever see them in here? Do you ever question them why you don't see them? Why you don't see them in the streets anymore? Why you don't see them on the news anymore? Just like Mr. Rambeau said, you can do all the talking, which they do, but now they talk to another person. And the other person doesn't speak in for them. But you never see them in public, but they're public officials. It's election year. and you still don't see them in public. But when do you see them representing you, and who's the representative for this district or where the museum is, and have you ever seen them in here? Those are the questions you gotta look at, and those are the questions you gotta ask them. Ask them directly, don't just type it to them. Ask them if you do see them in the streets, or yell it out to them so they can hear you, because they're probably gonna ignore you, but you don't see them anyway. And the only reason why you don't see them, because they don't want to be questioned by you, but you're paying them. So think about that.
As Sam said a
Hey,
little
let's
earlier,
get this after this young lady, yes?
I just would like to know what we can do to, I'm trying to summarize this in my head, because I was less than 6 years old when this took place. So I'm trying to see that, if I understand correctly, you're trying to leverage your power, like maybe an independent party, and now you're talking about the Black Party, and so you need to get somebody to listen, and I think we need to network more and get the city council, for instance, in Detroit, because I just heard today the Joe Louis Arena is going to be torn down. It's going to cost the city double what they expected when they gave it away in the bankruptcy. $12 million for the citizens, city of Detroit taxpayers to pay for. And like you ask, what's the stopping the gentrification? There's nothing, because there's so much investment coming in, we're losing control. So unless we get the city council to make the laws that will protect the people here who are already living here all these years, then we're not going to have any say in what happens. And I don't see the city council working very much when they give tax breaks to villages, and then they make us pay to tear down the Joe Louis. When we had the bankruptcy, Kevin Orr gave that away, saying it was negative, I heard it on the news, negative value. When you have international waterfront property right there next to the biggest conference center, why is that considered negative property? And nobody complained about him, everybody complained about them stripping the assets from the city, but they did it. And unless we can figure out how to stop them from continuing to do that, we're all going to get pushed out. Yeah, but we're not all pushed out yet, but it's continuing to happen.
well, Sam Riddle said when he was talking about the $1,000 a plate dinner.
Yeah.
I haven't attended many of those, okay? And those, unfortunately, are the people that so many of our elected officials represent. And until we start participating in the process and letting our opinions known and kind of intercede in the influence of the political lobbies, the corporate interests, and those $1,000 a plate dinners, we, again, by being here, that's the first part of it, by learning and knowing who is who and what is what, okay? Know our choice is between bad and worse a lot of times, okay? But we still have choices.
Can we get into the neighborhoods like they used to do when a campaign was going on, and the bullhorns and the megaphone or whatever, the speakers, and let people know what's going on and let them know why it's important to pay attention? Because a lot of people are distracted today. I was distracted for many years until I started finally paying attention, and now we have to, because if we don't educate, nobody's gonna know.
That's what it's all about, education, through media, through however,
No, what she
and
just
a
said is
one-to-one.
bullhorn.
Well, yes, that is the
Well, you
best
just have to
way.
get out there.
A one-to-one
You have to
contact.
take it to another level. I mean, you touched on something. You got
Right.
to take it to another level, and then,
You
that's
gotta
the way
knock
the
on
world
doors.
works.
It is behooves us
Because
all.
you're feeling this.
Yep. That's a
Charles?
good idea. She's got a good idea.
Comment?
The problem is with
Bullhorn,
her,
yeah, you have to get
nobody
out
wants
there.
to do it with her.
Well, you
I'm blind,
feel it.
I can't drive. I need somebody to, I have bullhorns, my mom bought them for me, but nobody, I can't get anybody to take me out and do what they used to do for, elections and stuff. We need people going through the neighborhoods that let people know what needs to be done.
Organize your community.
After you get out there inside and get on that bullhorn, people are gonna start coming to you. Once you get out there and start put yourself on the line, people gonna start coming to you. I'm not gonna say you're a leader, but now we living in people that are glued to iPhones and iPods and cell phones and Apple computers and that. Once you get out there and that, they got with your bullhorn, they gonna start coming to you.
But I need somebody, I'm
Charles?
right.
And then that could be then you got a different kind of problem. You know. Riddle is good for that, Sam. Yeah, he's real good.
Good evening, brothers and sisters. My name is Charles Simmons. I'm co-director with my wife for the Hush House Black Community Museum. And I've been in Detroit and River Rouge all my life. And I didn't attend this, the Gary conference. I knew about it, but I didn't attend. I was busy doing, I was working as a reporter at the time, actually, for Muhammad Speaks. But I was out of the country. I think it's extremely important that Leona and Brother Rambeau and others have brought this to us, and it needs to be shared widely, along with that history of the other conferences that happened back in the 1800s and maybe earlier. And it shows, our current situation shows how far back we have been set. And one of the, and I was involved in many of the struggles that we're talking about. The young people of the 60s, I would say in general, of the black community, and the Panthers and the League of Revolutionary Black Workers and SNCC, had a much different analysis of the problem in the United States than the older folks did in NAACP Corps and those types of organizations. The older folks generally believed that desegregation was our solution. That was a broad civil rights position. I would say the younger people wanted some fundamental social and economic change in the system, a revolution or something that was going to put a totally different type of society in place. And so the conference reflects that, the differences in those in the type of thinking. It's important to have an independent black organization that reflects our black needs, because we have been so oppressed and isolated and exploited, and that continues. At the same time, I think our organization has to have a relationship with other organizations that are involved in social change, because we have to, in terms of Nationtime, we have to build a completely new society, and that was going to require the participation of all the folks who want change, but we still have to have our own. I thought it was very important to see the struggle to incorporate the ideas of the African liberation struggle, the anti-apartheid struggle, as a part of the African American struggle in the Americas. And that's still very important. And it's also important today to see the new type of situation that exists in Africa, because the colonization did not go away. It changed form, and the colonization is more intense in Africa now than it was at that time, because there was a strong leadership on the ground in Africa to build a new continent, a Pan-African socialist type of struggle. The presence of China, we're talking about so many different things. The coming of China into Africa is a major problem throughout the continent, but it's not only in Africa, but it's also in the Caribbean, in the West Indies, South America. I mean, China is a major power. And although in the 70s, 60s, we thought of China as a revolutionary force. So this is a totally different China we're dealing with now. But we cannot ignore the fact that the Europeans are still a dominant force in Africa. I mean, they still control the diamonds and gold and oil and all of that. China is a newcomer, but the African people are still being exploited. We don't own the resources of our continent, there, nor in the Caribbean or in South America. So we had so many issues brought up tonight that are very important, but they can't all be resolved in this type of discussion. We need to think about first of all, finding out what organizations exist in Detroit. I mean, there are many organizations addressing some of these issues. We need to be aware of who's doing what. And then we need to have organizational meetings citywide so that we can create a new structure that can address all of these different issues in some type of coherent way. They're very important questions that are raised, all of them. And we have to be prepared to make the sacrifice, to give up the time, to start all over again. I mean, we've been sitting way back, but we got to face that. We've been sitting back here, we've been sitting back in Africa. And so we've got to start all over if necessary and do whatever we have to do. Now it's a great sacrifice. This institution is in danger, and we have to face that. Now the question is are we going to make the sacrifices necessary to save it? And the problem is, I mean, when we look in the mirror, that's the solution. Nobody's coming to help us with good intent. We don't have any friends who are coming to help us, giving us something.
Can you talk about the Saturday program here?
The program that I'm aware of is the independent the independent schools that are here. That's an extremely important move because we have lost, or in the process of losing, whatever we've had of public education. And then that raises what type of education do we need now? It's important that homeschooling, I think, is very important at this stage in our history because we're not being educated in any way that's beneficial to our people. But even that, homeschooling needs to be a systemic type of organization, not everybody doing their own thing. So I think it's important that the programs that we have here also need to be shared throughout the community. They need to be at the public schools at night, in faith institutions. It needs to go all over the city because many people, although we have some very important cultural institutions in the city, many people who live in the hood where I live won't go to any of these institutions. We have to take it to them. And so I've tried to encourage some of the academicians to bring their show on the road, you know, and that's still something that's very important. They have the access to people with a lot of knowledge on campus. They need to bring that into the community. And I want to commend Brother Rambeau for his, long-term sacrifice and dedication in the community of bringing us community theater, of educating people in the media. Generations of people who have learned from him and have gone on and done great things. So again, we've got to think about reorganizing from scratch. We're at the bottom, we got to fight our way back up. But we can do it. We've done it before, and we have to do it again. But it's going to take a great sacrifice. And we're fighting on all fronts. It's not, we can't even list the different types, the numbers of struggles we've got going on. We have an enormous health crisis in the country. Black women are highest in the world, African American women highest in the world in breast cancer. African American men are highest in the world in prostate cancer. We've got all types of diseases in the community that can be prevented. But we don't get any decent information about health care and preventative care. But it's going to take time and sacrifice for us to sit down and think about a long-term plan. Now, one of the things I said about China, the Chinese have a 100-year plan for what they're going to do. They know exactly what they're going to do, and they work, they sacrifice, and they do it. And so we can't even begin to criticize what they're doing. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing, taking what they want for their purposes. The French, they're doing what they want to do. That's for to satisfy their needs. But we have to figure out exactly what we want, what type of society do we want, and how we're going to implement that. But we don't have any friends. Nobody's coming to save us. See? Look in the mirror, that's it. If other people do come, that's good. But we can't start off with depending upon anybody else to do anything. Thank you.